Welcome back to Wild West Stories. Today's tale is shocking. My brother, he defiled me. The rancher was stunned, then did the unthinkable. A story of betrayal, pain, and revenge from the heart of the Wild West. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Where are you watching from? Let's get started. The sun was setting low over the Arizona plains, bleeding orange fire into the endless horizon. The wind whispered through the dry grass, carrying with it the faint scent of dust, sweat, and sorrow. Sarah Whitlock stood by the corral fence, her gloved hands resting on the weathered wood, watching the horses shift restlessly as the day slipped away. Her heart was heavy, burdened by memories of what her life used to be, a life of laughter, of faith, and of the quiet security that came from knowing her brother would always protect her. But that was before the betrayal. The Whitlock Ranch had stood for nearly 20 years, carved from sweat and stubborn will. Their late father, Jonathan Whitlock, had built it from nothing but barren land and a dream of freedom. Sarah had grown up chasing calves through the pastures, mending fences and learning to shoot before she could write her own name. Her brother Eli had been her hero, tall, proud, and fearless. Together they'd survived droughts, bandits, and harsh winters. But what the desert couldn't destroy, greed could. And Eli, once the pride of the Whitlocks, had fallen into the wrong company. It began small. A few nights away from home, whispers of cards, whiskey, and poker debts. Then came strangers riding through at dawn, men with cruel grins and restless eyes. Sarah had warned him that no good would come from associating with men like that, but Eli brushed her off with the same easy charm that had once melted her worries. "Don't fuss, Sarah," he'd said, tipping his hat. "A man's got to make his own way in this world." She didn't realize that his way would lead them both straight into ruin. The gang called themselves the Rustler's Sons, outlaws from Tombstone and Tucson, men who lived by taking what others had earned. They offered Eli gold, whiskey, and power, the kind of promises that sound sweet to a man whose pride outweighs his sense. He started making deals behind closed doors, and the ranch's cattle began to disappear. Sarah confronted him one night by the old barn, her voice shaking with hurt and anger. "You're stealing from your own blood," she cried. Eli turned away, shame flickering in his eyes before pride hardened it. "It ain't stealing if it's mine, too," he muttered. The days that followed were tense. Sarah tried to keep the ranch afloat, but her brother's shadow loomed over every sunrise. The ranch hands had begun to leave, frightened by the strange riders appearing on the ridge. Bills went unpaid. The crops dried up, and Sarah, though strong and unyielding, could feel the ground slipping beneath her boots. She still hoped Eli would come to his senses, that the brother who had once carried her across rivers and taught her to ride would return. But the man she loved as family was being swallowed whole by something darker, something she couldn't reach. Then came the night the fire started. Sarah woke to the sound of gunfire and the acrid smell of smoke. She bolted from her bed, throwing on her boots and grabbing the rifle from above the door. The sky glowed red. The barn ablaze, flames roaring like an angry god. Horses screamed inside, thrashing in terror. She ran toward the inferno, shouting for Eli, her voice breaking with fear. Through the smoke, a figure emerged. Her brother, face streaked with soot, eyes wild, a pistol dangling from his hand. For a heartbeat, she thought he had come to save her. "Eli," she cried, coughing through the smoke. "Help me get them out!" But he just stared, chest heaving, the firelight dancing across his face. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said hoarsely. "But it's too late now, Sarah." She froze, not understanding. Then she saw it, the barrel of the pistol, trembling, pointed at the ground but heavy with meaning. Behind him, the outline of other men appeared, mounted and watching. The Rustler's Sons. Realization hit her like a bullet. Her brother hadn't come to save the ranch. He'd come to claim it. The fire raged on, devouring the barn, the fences, the dreams their father had built. Sarah grabbed a burning plank and struck at one of the riders as he approached, screaming for them to leave. But they only laughed, turning their guns skyward and firing into the night. The horses broke free, scattering into the desert. Eli shouted something to his men, then turned and fled into the darkness. Sarah fell to her knees as the roof collapsed, the heat searing her face. She had never known pain like that, not from the flames, but from the betrayal that burned deeper. By morning, half the ranch was gone. The air smelled of smoke and death. Sarah walked through the ashes barefoot, numb to the cuts and burns on her skin. She found her father's old branding iron lying in the dirt, the W still warm from the fire. She lifted it, staring at the mark that once meant pride and legacy. Now it was a symbol of everything she'd lost. The neighbors came by, offering sympathy, but none dared stay long. They all knew Eli had joined the outlaws and that the Whitlock name was cursed. As the sun rose over the blackened land, Sarah made a silent vow. The ranch might have been burned to dust, but she would not let it die. Not like this. She would rebuild even if she had to do it alone. She would fight the thieves, the drought, and her own blood if she had to. But most of all, she would find Eli. Not to forgive him, but to make him answer for what he'd done. She turned toward the horizon, her eyes hard as steel. The West had taken everything from her. Now she would take something back. Winter came early to the desert that year. The nights grew longer, and frost crept across the barren fields like a ghostly hand. Sarah Whitlock rose before dawn every morning, tending what was left of her ranch with the few men brave enough to stay. Her hands were blistered and raw, her face hardened by the wind. Each sunrise brought the same quiet question. Where was Eli now? Rumors drifted in from passing riders, whispers that he had joined a gang terrorizing ranchers near the New Mexico border. Each rumor made her heart ache, but it also fed her resolve. One evening, a trader stopped by the ranch with supplies and news. He spoke of a new outlaw calling himself Eli the Black, leading a band of thieves who robbed stagecoaches and burned homesteads for fun. Sarah listened in silence, her jaw tight. When the trader left, she walked out to the old oak by the river, the only place untouched by the fire. Beneath its twisted branches, she knelt and whispered to the earth. "Father, if you can hear me, give me strength. I've got to face him. I can't let his sins carry our name any longer." The next morning, she saddled her mare, packed her rifle, and rode south. The trail to New Mexico was long and cruel. Days turned to weeks as she crossed the desert, chasing rumors and following broken tracks left by bandits. At every saloon and way station, she heard tales of her brother's cruelty. Some said he'd killed a man in cold blood. Others swore he had taken over an abandoned ranch near the Rio Grande, ruling it with an iron fist. The more she learned, the less she recognized him. The Eli she knew had been reckless, not ruthless. At dusk one day, Sarah reached a small town called Silver Creek. The streets were empty, save for a few drunken miners and a pair of lawmen lounging outside the jail. She tethered her horse by the trough and walked into the saloon. The room went quiet when she entered. Her dust-covered coat and cold blue eyes drew attention like a gunshot. The bartender gave her a wary look. "You lost, ma'am?" She placed a silver coin on the counter. "I'm looking for Eli Whitlock." The man stiffened. "You mean Eli the Black? You best ride the other way. Folks who go looking for him don't come back." But Sarah didn't turn back. The next day, she found his camp. It was perched on a ridge overlooking the river, guarded by men with rifles and dead eyes. She waited until nightfall, slipping through the shadows like a wraith. Her heart pounded as she reached the edge of the campfire light. And there he was, Eli, her brother, sitting at a table, laughing with his men, a whiskey bottle in hand. He looked older, meaner, his face carved by guilt and greed. For a long time she just watched him, torn between rage and the faint echo of love that still lingered. When she finally stepped into the light, the laughter died. Eli's hand froze on his glass, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Sarah?" he said, voice low. She didn't answer. The men looked between them, uneasy. "You shouldn't have come here," he muttered, rising to his feet. "I came to finish what you started," she said coldly, resting her hand on the revolver at her hip. "You burned our home. You destroyed everything. I want it back. My land, my name, my peace." Eli laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Peace? Ain't no peace left in this world, sister." The men around them shifted, sensing danger. Eli raised a hand, motioning them back. "This is between me and her," he said. He walked closer, the fire casting long shadows across his face. "You think you can just walk in here, point a gun, and erase what's been done? You don't understand what I've seen. The West eats weak folks alive. I did what I had to." Sarah's eyes flashed. "You did what the cowards do. You ran from honor." For a moment, the brother and sister stood inches apart, the fire crackling between them, their pasts burning away like dry grass. Then came the sound of metal, a single chilling click. Eli drew first. The world seemed to slow. Sarah ducked, fired once then twice. The shots rang across the canyon, echoing into the cold night. When the smoke cleared, Eli staggered backward, clutching his chest. His pistol fell from his hand, clattering onto the stones. He looked at her with eyes full of regret and something like relief. "You always were. Stronger than me," he whispered. She caught him as he fell, lowering him gently to the ground. His blood stained her hands, warm and bright against the desert dust. Sarah held him there until his breathing stopped. No tears came at first. The stars above were cold and silent, watching as she buried him by the river beneath a lone mesquite tree. She carved his name into a rough stone. No titles, no curses, just Eli Whitlock. When dawn broke, she stood over the grave, whispering, "You were my brother once, and I'll remember you that way." Then she turned her back on the camp, her figure small against the rising sun, her shadow stretching long across the desert floor. She rode home slowly, the journey marked by silence and wind. The ranch was still scarred from the fire, but the land had begun to heal. Shoots of green grass pushed through the ash. The cattle had returned. Sarah rebuilt the barn, plank by plank. Her grief poured into every nail and beam. Neighbors came to help, drawn by her quiet strength. Some called her a legend, others called her cursed. But Sarah didn't care for stories. She only wanted peace, the kind her brother had stolen and she had finally reclaimed. And as the seasons turned, the Whitlock Ranch stood again, proud and whole. Years later, travelers passing through Arizona would hear her name spoken in low tones. Some said she was the woman who tamed the desert. Others whispered she had shot her own kin, but Sarah Whitlock never corrected them. She lived out her days tending horses, staring out at the horizon where the sun bled into the hills, always waiting for the wind to bring her brother's name back one last time. When it didn't, she smiled softly. The West had taken much, but it had also given her something no man could steal again, her freedom.